Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are taking a look at the Aviat Husky A-1C from Asobo. Interesting to note that we're now starting to see aircraft coming into the sim built by Asobo themselves. It is perhaps a little disappointing to see that it's not freeware, but I think it was fairly inevitable that they would start to introduce their own payware aircraft into the sim at some point. I would just like to preface the review by saying something that I think many of us are probably thinking, myself certainly included. Did we really need what is essentially another Cub from Asobo in the sim? I do realise that the Husky is not in fact identical to the Cub. It has a much more powerful engine, for example, and it's designed for stealth flight. It does open up to some degree flying opportunities in the sim that the likes of the Savage Cub doesn't. But honestly, playing spot the difference here, the aircraft are of course incredibly similar to look at. And frankly, whilst the Husky is the more powerful of the two aircraft, for the most part you can achieve very much the same thing with either airframe in the sim. We've already discussed before that I think it's a little bit disappointing to keep seeing this doubling up of aircraft types coming into the sim. It's one thing to see this sort of behaviour from two different developers. Obviously they're often not going to be inclined to coordinate on the products that they produce. But to see Asobo themselves bring yet another high-wing, tailwheel, single-engine aircraft into the sim, to my mind at least, it's a little bit disappointing. There are so many other aircraft that I would love to see in Microsoft Flight Simulator, even done to a default standard. And I'm not really sure that the Husky offers an awful lot over what we already have available to us. All that being said though, for today's flight we are going to try and judge the aircraft based on its own merits. So we'll look at what the product actually has to offer, and then of course you can decide for yourselves whether or not that's of interest to you. Today's flight will not be a full review per se, it will be more of a first impressions. That being said, we'll still be taking the aircraft on a full flight from A to B. On this occasion we won't be taking quite such a detailed look at both the external and internal modelling and texturing of the aircraft. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with Asobo's standards when it comes to that department, and you will still get a good opportunity to see the quality of the aircraft throughout the flight. We're currently on the ground on the island of San Miguel, just off the western coast of the United States. We're parked up on the eastern side of the island at Ranger Station Airstrip, and we're going to take a short flight over to the other side of the island towards the Point Bennett Research Station. As usual, it will be a full startup, takeoff, cruise. We'll have a little bit of fun along the way. We'll test out the aircraft's flight model and handling a little bit. We'll make the landing into Point Bennett. We'll get the aircraft shut down. And again, whilst this isn't a full review, at the end I'll give you my overall thoughts and opinions on the product. So once again, we're looking to judge the Aviat Husky A-1C based on its own merits. As always though, hopefully we'll have some fun during the process and you'll enjoy the flight along the way. If you do, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below. But let's now head to the cockpit of the A-1C and get the aircraft started up. So welcome to the cockpit of the Aviat Husky A-1C. And again, internally you can see that the aircraft's done to a very nice standard. Very typical of a default aircraft, which, to be fair, I think graphically are very acceptable. Obviously though, we're very keen to see how the aircraft actually handles in the air, so we'll start running through the checklists. And worthy of note as well, we do now have an opening door on the Husky, which is nice to see, again, essentially considering this a default aircraft given that it's from Asobo. Anyway, the before start checks, flight controls. Are full free and in the correct sense. Fuel selector is on the main tank. Electrical equipment is off. Brakes are tested and set. For the start, the mixture is in the fully rich position. The prop lever is in the max RPM position. Alternate air is off. Master switch can come on. Get the nav lights on there as well. Avionics. So the checklist actually calls for the avionics on, which is a little bit unusual. Typically you'd wait until you've started the engine to get the avionics and the radios turned on, just to prevent them being damaged by any transient electrical loads, but we'll run as per the sim checklist today, so the avionics can come on. Just get the cockpit door closed up here as well, just to kill the noise there. So transponder is set to out, we'll just wait for the comm radio to initialise. And that's now set, so transponder, radios and avionics are on. Throttle will open 1/4 inch. The prop area is clear, so we'll just open up the door again momentarily, give them a clear prop. Clear prop! And we can get things closed up again. Electric fuel pump can come on. And we're just waiting till we see a peak in fuel pressure there, essentially priming the engine with the electric fuel pump.
Caution, low fuel pressure.
So low fuel pressure, of course, we'd be expecting that at the moment. So mixture is set, ignition can go to start. As you can hear, pretty nice startup sounds there from the engine. Just adjusting the throttle to idle around 1000 RPM. Oil pressure has come up into the green. Alternator can come on. And the cockpit door is closed. We'll just get our instruments set up for the flight. So the altimeter will just set QFE, zeroing out the altimeter. It's going to be a very short local flight today. We'll go to map on the GPS. We're not going to require it really today, but we'll have it there nonetheless for reference. And we can tune up traffic, that's 1229. We'll be departing out towards the southeast. Runway 12, and we'll call for taxi.
Kilo Bravo Uniform Echo Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is taxiing to runway 12.
So it's going to be a very short taxi. The runway is just behind us, you can't quite see it there, but we'll taxi past these two marshallers and then we'll swing ourselves around into wind for the run-up. So park brake off. Just come up on the throttle, get the aircraft rolling. Keep a good eye on our wing clearance here, make sure we're not going to hit anybody. And we're all clear. As you can see from the windsock, the wind is pretty much straight down the runway. So we'll just taxi beam the threshold, come back on the brakes for the run-up. And that has the aircraft into wind, so gentle on the brakes, park brake can come on. Again adjusting the throttle to idle around 1000 RPM. And for the run-up itself, flight controls, checking those again. And once again they're full free and in the correct sense. Flight instruments are set. Elevator trim is set to neutral. Fuel selector, we are on the main tank. And the fuel quantities are balanced. We've got about 50% fuel on board. Mixture is in the rich position. Alternate air is off. Throttle will come up to 1900 RPM for the run-up. So coming fully back on the stick. And again, overall the engine sounds rather nice. Says 1900 RPM, we'll do a mag check. We've got about a 40 RPM drop there on the left-hand magneto. Back to both. Max drop's 150, so we're well within the limits there. And onto the right. And same on the right, back to both. Check the prop RPM. That's all the way back there on the prop RPM. As you can see, we're not really getting much of a drop at all, if any. So I think that's probably modelled a little bit incorrectly at the moment, unfortunately. Anyway, teaser piece check. We'll come all the way back to idle. And idling around 600 RPM, that looks reasonable. So back up to 1000 RPM. We'll get ourselves lined up on the runway, so we'll call for takeoff. We'll be departing out to the west.
Kilo Bravo Uniform Echo Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra taking off runway 12 departure to the west.
So strobe lights can come on, recognition lights can come on, landing light can come on, park brake can come off. It's all clear upwind. Just swing out slightly to the right here to check final. It's all clear on final. So we'll get ourselves lined up on the runway. We'll hold short just momentarily so you can get a feel for the external sounds of the aircraft. So we are all set and ready to go, just holding the aircraft on the brakes at the moment. Obviously the main draw for the Husky is that it's a STOL aircraft, so we'll try and get off in the shortest distance possible. Looking to rotate at a speed of 50 knots, we'll just leave the flaps up since we do have plenty of runway. So we'll just slowly come up on the power, holding the aircraft on the brakes initially. And there's full power, feet off the brakes. Got an engine overspeed caution at the moment, we'll disregard that. And there's 50 knots, coming back on the stick. And we're up. So as you can see, we can get off in very short order should we wish to do so. Definitely one of the benefits of the Husky. Anyway, we'll come back on the power now for the climb, so we'll come back to 25 inches on the manifold pressure and 2500 RPM. Just give the engine a little bit of a rest. And we'll swing ourselves now out towards the north of the island. Lovely scenery over here on San Miguel Island. Basically just going to track up the northern coastline, taking a few of the sights as we go. And then we'll land over on the western side of the island. Cruise our way over around 500 feet, probably even go a little bit lower than that at various points, just to really have some fun. So we'll come back to 22 inches on the manifold pressure. And back to 2300 RPM. T's and P's looking good. The Husky certainly has an abundance of power, you can definitely feel that. Got Prince Island just below us on the left. And this is Koila Harbour just in the bay here. And so far, once again, the aircraft feels very much like a default aircraft in terms of its handling. Not to say that's 100% a bad thing, it's very pleasant to fly. It does feel very similar to the Savage Cub, but again, you can feel there's that real abundance of power there. And on the takeoff run, obviously, again, it was quite a short takeoff run, but the rudder felt very reasonable. Not that we had to counter any crosswind. Although I did notice there was no real torque or aerodynamic effects there from the engine, and it's quite a big beefy engine there. We've got 200 horsepower, I believe it is, sat out in front of us, so you might expect a little bit more in terms of torque and P-factor. I didn't really feel anything there from the aircraft. Didn't really have to put in too much rudder input. So the flight model quite possibly a little bit on the simplified side. Anyway, as I say, we'll make our way along the beach. Fly nice and low level. The harbour's just on the western side of the bay here. We'll see if we can spot anything on the way round. As you can see, the sun's getting fairly low on the horizon now as well, so it is just going to be a fairly quick hop today. Just adjust the map there on the GPS so you can see destination. Can't really see anything awfully much resembling a harbour at the moment. Pretty pleasant evening here anyway on San Miguel. It's 20 degrees outside at the moment, as you can see. Lovely evening for a flight. Overall, the aircraft is incredibly smooth to fly. Nice and responsive on the controls as well. And although I'm not a huge fan of the digital avionics, they are very smooth, they do a nice job, they have all the information you really need to fly the aircraft. Anyway, we'll continue tracking along the coast. Just coming up now is Harris Point. We'll come back up to climb power here. We'll gain a little bit of height just so we can enjoy some of the scenery with a bit of an improved vantage point. So doing 25 again for climb power. Again, as you can see, the ball is more or less completely centered. I have no rudder input there at the moment. Could maybe just use a slight squeeze or right rudder, but again, from such a powerful engine at relatively low speed in this sort of an airframe, I probably would expect to see more in terms of aerodynamic effects from the engine. Overall though, some really pretty coastline, I have to say, on San Miguel. There is a little monument actually just behind us, just out to the south of the bay, but I'm fairly sure that's not modelled in Flight Simulator, unfortunately. And as I said, it will be a very quick hop. As you can see, we're almost coming up on destination at this point. Got Otter Harbour now. We'll just continue a little bit further around the island here, otherwise we've only had a very, very quick flight out in the Husky. And coming back again to 22 inches, 2300 RPM. So just coming up on the western edge of the island here, we've got Otter Harbour just behind us. Castle Rock. Just out to the 2 o'clock position at the moment. So I presume that's Castle Rock just down there. Not sure if there is a castle or not indeed modelled on the island. Again, I suspect not, but we'll go and have a quick look. And again, overall the aircraft is really good fun to chuck around. So it doesn't look like there's any sort of a fortification on the island itself, but it may well just be that the name comes from the shape of the rock. Anyway, right out on the western edge of the island, we've got Adams Cove. There's actually a wreck as well, right on the western edge. Cuba wreck. Looks like there's also a wildlife sanctuary in the area. Anyway, we'll tune up Kilo Lima Oscar Papa traffic. The Point Bennett Research Centre. Be landing back towards the southeast. So again, we'll take runway 12. We'll just make a position call for now.
Kilo Lima Oscar Papa traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra 2 miles west, 100 feet inbound to land runway 12.
Again, beautiful scenery down in the bay. We'll come up to climb power again. We'll just do a quick stall just to see if the flight modelling has improved from the default aircraft. So we're getting a little bit of altitude. And in fact, we'll come up to full power. So we do get some nice cautions there. You've seen we have a fuel pressure and oil pressure caution, as well as a engine overspeed caution. So I think it's fair to say there's a little bit more functionality than your average default aircraft. We'll just stay overhead the water here for the stall. Yeah, the simplest and easiest way to describe the Husky is that it's very similar to flying the Carbon Cub or the Savage Cub. So essentially a very pleasant aircraft to fly, but somewhat simplistic in terms of its flight modelling. Anyway, we'll trade the rest of this speed for altitude. We'll do a power on stall. As you can see, the speed now coming right back. We do need a little bit of rudder there to keep the ball centred. Continuing to come back on the stick. There's a stall warning. No buffeting. Okay, we do have a little bit of buffeting now. And coming all the way back on the stick, the right wing wanting to drop there. Looks like the spin's developing as well. Anyway, with the water here getting a little bit disorientated, so we won't let that spin develop any further. But overall, not bad. Again, for a default aircraft, I think pretty decent flight modelling there. It didn't feel quite as up to standard as some of the more recent payware add-ons that we've seen, but again, this aircraft is made by Asobo and it is fairly cheap as well, so not expecting something on a par with the likes of Flying Iron Simulations or Just Flight. Anyway, we'll head back towards the field. A little bit tricky to spot this one. It's a dirt strip and more or less surrounded by dirt, so we're going to have to keep a good lookout. We use the GPS as a reference there to help us identify it. I think we've got it now, just off our 10 o'clock. We'll come in for a left-hand downwind. And again, the Husky is a STOL aircraft, so we'll try and get it stopped as quickly as we possibly can. So yeah, you can just see the strip there at our 10 o'clock. And the sun getting ever lower on the horizon. Local time is 7:30 PM, so probably only another 20 minutes or so of daylight. Probably a good time to be making a landing. So we'll call downwind.
Kilo Lima Oscar Papa Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on downwind runway 12.
Get our downwind checks done, so brakes are checked and off, undercarriage is down, mixture is rich, fuel pump is on, landing light is on, instruments are checked, harness is secure. Fuel quantity is looking good, we've burned through almost nothing there on the fuel. Start coming back on the power. Let that speed keep coming back. We'll start configuring for the landing. Turn down to base. So just in the white arc now, we can start taking some flap.
Oscar Papa Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is on final runway 12 to land.
Pitch can go to full fine, undercarriage is down, flaps are set. Ultimately we're now carrying a bit more speed than we would have liked, but we'll again try and get the aircraft stopped as quickly as possible. So coming back on the stick, holding her off. Come straight onto the brakes. And now just easing off on the brake pressure. So again, overall we can stop the aircraft in very short order should we wish to do so. There was definitely a bit of room there to optimise that approach. Took a few more knots than I was planning to. Anyway, we'll get ourselves clear of the runway. Just taxi ourselves off and face towards the sunset, why not? And we can enjoy the beautiful evening sunset there whilst we get the aircraft shut down. So park brakes on. We'll come back up to 1000 RPM. After landing checks, the landing light can come off, recognition lights can come off, as can the strobes. We'll just call clear of the runway before I forget.
Kilo Lima Oscar Papa Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra is clear of the runway.
Flaps are up, transponder can come off. And for the shutdown, lights are off, transponder is off, radio is off. Avionics can come off. Mixture can come back to idle cutoff. Ignition can come off. Avionics are off. Alternator is off. Master switch is off. Get the cockpit door opened up once again. And that is the shutdown checklist complete. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed our little outing in the Aviat Husky. Overall I did enjoy my time out in the aircraft, although I have to say once again I'm not sure that it would have been any less fun in the Savage Cub. Anyway, as I say, I'll give you my brief overall thoughts and opinions on the product, breaking down what's good and what's bad. As usual, we'll start with the negative. Obviously there's one glaring negative here, and again that is the fact that the aircraft really doesn't offer a whole lot over most of the default aircraft within the sim. For me, the aircraft is a little bit of a mashup between the Savage Cub, the Shock Ultra and the Carbon Cub. Obviously the airframe looks very similar to the Savage Cub, the avionics are very similar to the Carbon Cub, and the performance is very similar to the Shock Ultra. In its own rights, I do really like the aircraft. I think it's very good fun, and I do like the mix it has between the old and the new. But I'm not entirely convinced that that's really enough to take it over the line into warranting a purchase. Ultimately though, that's my only real major gripe with the aircraft. I think it's actually done very nicely. It's certainly up to the usual standards of a default aircraft. So if you are thinking of purchasing the Husky, really it just comes down to whether or not you as an individual are interested in the aircraft. It does have a few nice things going for it. Firstly, the price. It is quite reasonably priced as a module. Asobo, for their faults in some departments, certainly know how to make a decent GA aircraft in terms of visuals and modelling. The Husky certainly lives up to those standards, and I do think, taking into account the pricing of the product, that the flight modelling is actually perfectly acceptable. The sounds as well I thought were very good. Again, the sounds are very familiar to the default aircraft in many areas, but the engine sounds I thought were really nice. One thing the aircraft does have going for it over the Savage Cub, and I believe this is still the case, but with the Husky you do also get the float plane and the ski variants. Obviously that opens up some more opportunities for various types of flying. I personally have really been enjoying doing some float plane flying recently in the sim. And whilst you can have floats and skis on both the Carbon Cub and the Shock Ultra, I believe I'm correct in saying that the Savage Cub is still a wheels only aircraft. So with the Husky you do get some nice variation. There's also a Tundra tyre variant available as well. In terms of paint schemes, plenty of liveries to choose from with the aircraft. And again, we do have those few little extra touches of attention to detail with the opening cockpit door, the cautions and warnings for the oil temperature, engine RPM, things of that nature. So I would say that the Husky does slightly elevate itself above the default aircraft. It also performs very similarly in terms of FPS. I was losing about 4 FPS versus the default Cessna 152, which I think is pretty good given that the aircraft does have quite a few screens in the cockpit. Overall, as I say, I did really enjoy my flight in the aircraft. I probably will fly it again. I don't regret purchasing the aircraft, although I don't think I would have bothered personally if it weren't for this review. So really, once again, whether or not the aircraft is worthy of a purchase comes down to you as an individual. If you've flown the aircraft perhaps in the real world, or you're just very fond of that rather beautiful Husky there on the tail, then maybe it is worth picking up. Again, it's fairly reasonably priced. Otherwise though, I would say there's probably not a whole lot there that you can't get with the various other default aircraft in the sim. So once again guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comments section below, and as always I'll do my best to answer them. And again, thank you very much to my channel members and Patreons for all of your support. I hope all of you have a great day, and I'll see you all again soon.